Okay, we are live. Hello and welcome to our weekly wellness sessions for musicians. My name is Francesca Leo and I'm the founder of PlayingWithoutPain.com, an interactive web resource committed to connecting musicians with resources to treat and prevent performance-related injuries and maintain good mental health. I'm also the chair of the Wellness Committee for the Puerto Rico Flute Symposium, and I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Koebbe, who has her DMA and other degrees in piano performance, and specializes in helping teachers learn to address performance anxiety and adopt mindfulness practices into their private teaching. She currently teaches at Mid-America Nazarene University and is the founder of Mindful Music Pedagogy. Our past few sessions have addressed the relationship between the brain and the body. All sessions are archived on the Puerto Rico Flute Symposium Facebook page, as well as PlayingWithoutPain.com and MindfulMusicPedagogy.com, and the Diaz del Moral Foundation.org. If you're a music educator and you wish to share this video with your students, we also offer the recorded Zoom sessions, which you can find on diazdelmoralfoundation.org/wellnessformusicians. You may also send us an email at info@prflutesymposium.org, where we can share the MP4 files with you directly. We always welcome any questions or topic or guest artist recommendations as we proceed with these sessions. You may either post a comment below or send an email to info@prflutesymposium.org with any questions you might have. We also have a link in the description if you would like to make a donation, which we would be very grateful for. The donation will go to the Diaz del Moral Foundation and will help us help support us in bringing on more guest artists in the future. So today we're going to continue with the brain portion of our wellness sessions, and Jessica is going to be leading us through some preparation tips while beginning your meditation practice. So to begin, we would like to start by offering a brief history of meditation, citing its origins and how it's been adapted and westernized over time. So meditation, or dhyana, is a sacred method of practice of the Sanatana Dharma, which is also known as Hinduism. It is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, also known as Ashtanga, which is an 8-fold path outlining guidelines on how to live a meaningful and purposeful life. This 8-fold path originated out of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. These sutras included 195 aphorisms about the yoga philosophy that examines the human spirit's relationship to the material world and how the spirit might be freed from suffering through discipline and introspection. And if you don't get all this, don't worry, I will post a link in the description with all of this text outlined so that you can review it also. So meditation practice has been recorded as early as 1500 BCE and has originated from the earliest forms of Hindu scriptures, including the Bhagavad Gita, which is an excerpt from the Mahabharata, which is a text of justice and liberation that has been designated as yoga. Between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, the Chinese Taoist and Indian Buddhist traditions began developing their own forms of meditation practice, including the beginning of the Zen practice in Japan in 653 AD. So the heart of the Zen practice is a form of seated meditation called Zazen, meaning the study of self, or a method of studying the Buddha way. So meditation has recently become an incredibly popular practice and is now being studied by several scientists and medical professionals for its profound positive effect on the brain and mental and physical well-being. The Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MSBR, program was founded in 1979 by Jon Kabat-Zinn in the United States as a method of treating patients with chronic diseases using meditative techniques. It plays a central role in many religious traditions and rituals, in addition to helping individuals manage stress and improve overall well-being. So when practicing any form of meditation, we must cultivate an appreciation for its history and origins, and continue to educate ourselves and seek awareness of how this practice has been westernized in our modern world. So with that brief overview, I invite you to take a breath, and I will let Jessica take over.
Thank you. Thanks for that great and very thorough introductions, Francesca. I know that if meditation is a new idea or something that maybe you haven't spent any time really diving into, some of those terms that Francesca mentioned might be unfamiliar to you. I know they were to me when I first started learning about this. And for anybody who's interested, Francesca and I have both enrolled in a certification course to teach meditations. So Francesca's actually finished, so nice job. I'm not far behind. And she's actually done a lot more work with meditation in other areas. So it's something we're still learning a lot about. And I know for me, it's still something I practice regularly, and but there's still a lot to learn. So that's kind of where we're both coming at this from. But if this is all new to you, don't worry. We'll be unpacking this idea of meditation and its origins and how it can be used in musical practice over some other upcoming sessions. But as a reference for where I'm coming from today, I'm basing what I'm sharing off of that mindfulness-based stress reduction, that MSBR trends that Francesca mentioned. And if anybody's interested in learning more about this, the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine actually has a mindfulness center that is based in MSBR study, and they offer a lot of classes and resources that might be helpful to anybody who's interested. It might also interest you to know that a lot of well-known successful figures practice meditation. That's usually not something that makes the headlines, but if you do a little digging on the topic of meditation and successful people, you'll find a lot of top achievers who practice this skill, such as Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Oprah Winfrey, Jeff Weiner, Rick Goings, Mark Benioff, Kristen Bell, no surprise, Deepak Chopra, Steve Jobs did, Ariana Huffington, Paul McCartney, Bob Stiller. Just it spans the range of professional athletes, musicians, CEOs. But the point is that this is a skill that many people who are high achievers have developed. And if you read a lot of what they say about this, they credit a lot of their success to this practice. So a little bit more about meditation. I did want to give you a heads up that throughout this discussion, I'll be interspersing it with some moments where I'll ask you to write some things down. So maybe grab something to write with, paper if possible. Let's try to avoid using our devices for that. And then let's begin. So one of the things that actually really attracted me to this idea of meditation was being the boss of my own thoughts. We all have people in our lives who boss us around. Sometimes it's actually their job to do that. And then sometimes it's not, right? And we have to figure out how we're going to respond to that. But it could be parents, teachers, siblings, actual bosses. But this idea of wouldn't it be nice to just be the boss of your own thoughts for once? And that's actually part of what meditation does. We get to be in charge of what's going on in our brains. Meditation requires a high level of attention to what's happening in our minds, especially during certain periods of time and during certain activities. And here's the thing that we have to remember. Only we know what we're thinking about. No one else has any clue. And that can be a really good thing, especially if we're able to recognize that we choose the path of our thoughts. And whether or not we actually realize this, we are always choosing the path of our thoughts, whether that is conscious or subconscious. And what meditation does is help to bring to light the subconscious tracks that our mind likes to travel down. So if we don't like how our thoughts are tracking, we can change them, and the practice of meditation streamlines that to such a degree that those who are skilled in this practice are able to do it almost instantaneously. And of course, being aware of our thoughts and their power and our ability to change them has a huge impact on our overall physical and mental well-being, as well as our relationships with people and our instruments. I know I have, and I'm going to guess that you have probably experienced times when your mind was completely tuned in to what you're doing and you achieved some really amazing results because you felt focused and you were really productive. And this is one of those points that I'd love for you to jot something like that down. If there's a memory or just a word or two you can think of that will encapsulate that moment, put it down on that piece of paper. If there's not anything that comes to mind immediately, just make a little note to think about that and kind of tune into that this week and see if you have felt that this week or if a memory comes to you. Likewise, there are probably times that you really knew you needed to focus, but your mind was getting distracted and the end result was not a great product. And I'm sure every person has had this happen, especially in practicing, right? So practicing the skill of meditation will result in having better mental focus and control over your thoughts in those moments. As Francesca alluded to earlier, today's discussion, I'm calling it pre-meditation discussion because we're not actually going to be meditating today, but in a future session, we'll lead you guys through a meditation session. But I believe that in order to do that more effectively, it's good to begin with a discussion about the origins and then also to briefly talk about how it impacts us as musicians and let that kind of settle in and think about that for a little bit before we actually begin a practice. But meditation is one of the most common forms of achieving relaxation, and it begins in the mind. The purpose of meditation is to get to a place where our minds are calm and we can observe and appreciate each moment of life as it happens without distraction. It's not emptying our minds of thought. Meditation actually has a lot of benefits, one of which is that it's an extremely effective treatment for anxiety. It increases our awareness of our inner and outer environments and encourages the acceptance of factors that are out of our control. So it's not pretending that those things aren't there. It's acknowledging that they're there, accepting reality, and coming to peace with those things. All of that enables us to relax in stressful situations. We're not checking out, we're not opting out of those situations. We're just able to be present in those situations without engaging with all of the anxiousness or negativity. And meditation in a musical performance context increases the connection between our minds and bodies. It shows us how to become aware of our thoughts, and it ultimately allows us to quickly calm our mental and physical beings in the moment of performance. And so in order to do that, becoming a thought observer is the first step in developing this mental awareness. And that's where we're going to focus today. So wouldn't it be amazing if we became such a master thought observer and practitioner that we could immediately notice and address any thought that we did or did not want in just a second or two? And the point of this is that we get to decide what we think about, and we're the bosses of our brains. So there are two activities that I thought I'd walk us through today. And if I can screen share for just a second, Francesca, I'm going to pull this up and walk us through this first one. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is to take a few minutes to just carefully think about the kinds of thoughts that seem to help me or you stay focused while practicing. Maybe it's thinking of a story, an image. Does humming the tune help? Think about some thoughts that tend to distract you while you're practicing. Sometimes it's just the noise around us, right? Maybe it's that we're hungry. I know food occupies a lot of my thinking, especially if I'm hungry. Or it might be a get together or something like that we're looking forward to. So take just a second to write down some of the things that you feel like are focused thoughts, and then some things that are maybe some persistent distracting thoughts. And Francesca, if you're willing to share a couple of those, that'd be great. Just give me a thumbs up when you feel like you've got some in mind.
Yeah, of course. I also wanted to mention it looks like the screen is black.
Oh, is it? Oh dear.
Yeah. So maybe, do you want to try Xing out and sharing again?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm happy to share some thoughts. So the prompt was just thoughts that are coming up in my mind. I'm
In practice. So thoughts that are helpful and then thoughts that are unhelpful.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so overthinking like everything I'm doing is not helpful in practice. I think we tend to kind of get in our own heads a lot, and I'm definitely guilty of that. I always overthink every single little thing, and then it leads to me not being able to really have in a sense of inclusive awareness about my surroundings, my body, and what I'm actually doing. So it's overthinking details and also a fixation on things as well is not helpful. Things that are helpful, mindfulness. Really, just if I'm having a bad day, I feel like my thoughts are really swirling around. I'm placing a lot of emotion on the thoughts, a lot of judgment. I feel like that typically is helpful if I just look at the situation as how it is and I decide to not engage with emotionally charged thoughts and I really just try and disconnect from it, label the thought as it is happening, and then come back to the present situation or the breath. And it looks like it's still.
Oh dear. Okay. I'm not going to worry about it then. Let's just keep going. These are all going to be things that are available in a link that'll in the preview or in the show notes here. So no worries. Yes. So when you say label, how do you do that? Mentally? Do you write things down?
Yeah, I usually do it mentally. And then when I'm journaling, I may label the thought as this was coming up frequently for me today. But usually in the moment, I try and take a mental step back and kind of look at the thought from a distance, like outside looking in, and label it as this is an anxious thought, or I am feeling anxious about this situation, and not label it as good or bad and not place any judgment on it. Just
right. There are a lot of thoughts that could be called neutral thoughts too, that but they're not maybe helpful.
Yeah.
There's one other thing that I wanted to mention that a lot of people, everybody I'm sure who practices meditation experiences, and it's just kind of part of the process. And that is just that initial time that we start to sit down and quiet ourselves. It takes a little time physically and it takes a little time mentally to do that. So one of the most common things that happens is that right off the bat, we'll have all these things that come up that all of a sudden we're like, oh, hang on, I forgot to do this thing. I need to send that email. And then we have this kind of like swirl of information happening. I call it a mental dump. So I just need to take everything that's in my head and dump it out. I usually write it on paper and set it aside, because for me, if I try to meditate and there's like these really persistent things that maybe are very actually important things I need to do that I have forgotten, I'll write it down. So I'm not trying to hold on to that thought while I'm also trying to meditate. So that's actually the second activity that I wanted to share. And then this is really something that I would encourage everybody to try this week, not to do it right now, but to take some time, find a comfortable place, sit where you can be relatively distracted, even close your eyes if you can, and kind of stage it. So do it for, if you really struggle with this, set a timer for 1 minute and just put that on your phone and set it aside so you're not checking your phone and trying to count the time in your head. Set that aside for a minute, and then when the timer goes off, come back and just see like what was going on in your mind. Then timer goes on for 2 minutes. Same thing, revisit what was going on in your mind, write things down if you need, and then gradually work your way up to 5 minutes to where you can just sit there and kind of assess, step back a little bit, like Francesca said, maybe even step outside of your mind if you can for a little bit and just observe what's going on. And if you do that regularly, that initial kind of flurry of mental activity gets shorter and shorter, and it's easier to let that go and not be surprised by that or distracted by that so much as we go forward. So I would encourage everybody to try that today or this week. My goodness, my tongue is not cooperating today. So those activities and a link to some downloads where are they going to be, Francesca?
Yeah, so Jessica has really kindly included a link to her website with some free audio downloads. They are included in the description. So these are audio files that you can download and you can follow along with, correct, as forms.
Yes. Yes, and also there are some along that page, if you scroll down, there's something called a meditation bundle. So you can download those, and that's a paper form of that, some guided. There are audio samples of some guided exercises, but then there's also the written form of that. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. So next week we have a very exciting guest. His name is Felipe Borjoquez, and I apologize if I mispronounced that. I will be sure to double check for next week. But he will be presenting a presentation on the Alexander technique. He will be presenting it in Spanish, which is very exciting. We're very excited to have that. And he has asked if you would have your instrument nearby for this presentation to play along with some of the exercises he will be leading. So we are so excited to have Felipe next week, and thank you all for joining us. If you would like to reach out, feel free to comment on this video, send an email to info@prflutesymposium.org, or feel free to contact us via the Diaz del Moral Foundation.org website. Stay tuned for some upcoming events and recitals from the PR Flute Symposium. We will soon be announcing the Summer Symposium, which is very exciting. We have competitions that you can enter as well. So make sure to stay tuned on all of that information, and we would, in addition to seeing you next week, we would love to see you there this summer. And Jessica, if you wanted to say a couple words about the Collaborative Piano Institute as well before we sign off.
Yeah, during the same week that the Flute Symposium is occurring, the first Puerto Rico Collaborative Piano Institute will be held. It will all be virtual this year due to COVID. But as we have seen this past year, that doesn't stop us, right? We can still do things even collaboratively. So we encourage you to check out PuertoRicoCPI.org for more information on that. And also, quick plug, if you're interested in this upcoming week's discussion about Alexander technique, I would encourage you to check out last week's discussion with Eddie Malavi, who did some really great work on body mapping and also a couple of Alexander technique exercises. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Well, we will see you all next week and have a great evening.